This meeting to order. It is 10:06. We will begin with adoption of the agenda, item number 2.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the agenda.
I'll second that.
Chairman Heyman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Scribner, Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 3, public comment on closed session. Do we have any public comment from the floors? Seeing none. Do we have any public comment on the phones? There is none. We will now move into item number 4 in closed session. So we'll go to closed session and be back at 10:30. I'll move into open session. We'll begin with a report on closed session with Keith Lemieux.
Yes. The board met in closed session to discuss the items identified on the agenda. The board received a report on each of the items, but no reportable action took place. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report.
Thank you, sir. Okay, if everybody will please stand and face the flag and follow for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll have a roll call.
Chairman Heyman,
Present.
Vice Chair Scribner, Director Itmeyer,
Present.
Director Griffin,
Present.
Director Vallejo.
Present.
Okay, moving to item number 6, public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comment on the floor?
Good morning. Pat Ferris. Perhaps this should be directed to Carol. I was wondering if there is a special account dedicated specifically for the replenishment fees. If that is set aside so the money is available. If it's supposed to be for purchasing new water, right? So, or is that money available for paying other expenses like attorney's fees, or would there be any money left when we get ready to? I just kind of wondered if that is established as with funds available when it's needed. You probably can't answer that, but that's the question.
Mr. Chairman, I can respond if you like, but I'll leave it to your discretion.
Go ahead.
Sure. Hello, Ms. Ferris. I'm happy to respond. And if you take a look at the financials that are in our packet today, you'll see that there is a separate accounting for the replenishment fee. So while we don't have a separate account per se, all of our funds are held within the Kern County Treasury. We do separately account for replenishment fees. It's a restricted account, restricted fund. Now, that said, the funds that are there are available to use for activities related to water replenishment activities. So that may include attorney's fees if they're directly related to the replenishment fee. It could include other fees as well. but it is separately accounted for. And I invite you to take a look at our financial statements. And if you have any questions later, shoot me an email or give me a call.
Thank you, Carol, appreciate it.
Thank you, Pat. Any other public comment from the floor? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on the phone lines? Okay, no public comment on the phones. We'll now move on to item number 7, board member comments.
I have a couple, if you don't mind, just real quick. As far as future agenda items, I would like to see if we could add the communication and engagement plan that was provided by PAC late last year, added to the agenda next month, so we could discuss that and see where we were moving forward with that, or if we were changing, or we were enacting any of their recommendations. And then also, I would like, if we could, to get an update from legal as far as the appellate order, because there's a lot of stuff on social media, and I've had several phone calls. So if we could get the GA's take on how to answer those questions as a board member, or what is going on. And then the last one, I don't see it listed, Carol. I'm sure you might discuss it, but I would like to find out the status of the audit to see if they've done anything, or where we're at, or if there's something that they're needing to complete that, because I know we issued the change order and then we still haven't received the 21 audit. So if you could update us on that, that would be awesome. Thanks.
Can I get some clarifying questions? So I guess the first one is for the board generally, is it the intention of does the board accept the suggestion to bring the communications plan back? Is that the direction of the board?
I suppose my only question would be if the PAC is done discussing it.
I'm seeing a head nod.
If that's the case, I'm supportive of talking about it
Okay.
at this level.
Okay, so Carol will add that to the next agenda, I guess, seeing it looks like general agreement.
I'm in favor of bringing it back to the board
Thank you.
for an update.
The second, wait.
Let me clarify the answer to Director, forgot your last name, Vallejo's question. Yes, we are finished with it with the exception that noting it is a living document that we were going to keep reviewing. So we provided a set of recommendations as well as a draft formal plan. But there are potential for us, as you will see when the PAC report comes, that we are working on things that may identify additional recommendations that we would provide in for you all regarding communications and engagement, if not, a real change in writing in the plan itself. So there's two things. One is the communication and engagement stuff overall, how we do it, and the details, and then there is the plan. Those are two different. We have completed it, and Carol has reported on it twice, I think, over the last few months. But I think it's appropriate timing that the board address where you are with regards to those actions that we recommended.
Seems appropriate that at least someone from the PAC might present the recommendations and lead a conversation with this board about what you guys have discussed and concluded.
That's kind of what I was leaning toward, because in the past, we've had, PAC discussion on the C&E. And so would it be, a new agenda item, or would it just be that you would discuss it at PAC or have it, on your report to the board on your regular report? And would that be sufficient in our discussion, with the board at that time?
Well, I think Director Griffin's request, as I understood it, is to ask the board what actions, and Carol, what actions you're contemplating with regards to the recommendations in communications and engagement recommendations in general, and then the written plan itself, when we might see that update, because that was to be done, before the 5-year update. And so what I could present is a summary again of those recommendations, but the staff and the board would have to contemplate and agree on what their response is prior to that meeting, so that what you're doing is answering what your response was, because they've been provided in the past to you.
Okay, so I'm in favor of, bringing to the board as an agenda item. That's fine, as long as we're in communication with
Yeah, and
Dave-
I'll work
Dave and the
with
PAC
staff to
and-
see what we should present
and
from
time
our
it so
side.
we're- Okay.
Okay, perfect.
And Tim Etnier, do you have any concerns or comments?
No, I'm good.
You're good with it? Okay.
Can I go to the next point, if you don't mind? The next suggestion or request was something in public about, I think it was the appellate court's recent decision to allow a hearing. Is that what you were referring to?
Yes, correct. There's a bunch of stuff on Facebook, and I've had several phone calls, so I'd like to know how to answer that question.
Okay, well, let me respond briefly to that, but understand that discussions about the litigation happen in closed session. But I was asked about this from the paper yesterday, so let me explain that. So you have to understand the context of what's going on. The GA successfully got causes of action dismissed before trial through what's called a demur.
Okay.
So the case, so some causes of action, including requests for damages, were thrown out by the court for legal reasons. There is an unusual, normally you have to wait till the end of a case to appeal. There's an unusual procedure where sometimes you can appeal in the middle of a case. Mojave Pistachio invoked that procedure. This is the second time they've done that in this case. The first time, the court just said no. This time around, instead of just saying no, they said they wanted to receive a brief from the GA on it. That's it. That's the whole story.
Okay. So the GA will prepare a brief, then an answer back.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And then it remains to be seen what they do. Big picture, what this means is that there is now a chance that their case is not going, there's a chance the case won't be thrown out before trial. And that's all it means.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, Mark. And then I had one more question for Carol that I had asked about the audit.
Sure. And if you don't mind, I will include that in my report.
Perfect.
Okay, do we have any other board member comments? Okay, seeing none, we will now move on to item number 8, consent agenda. This will include items 8A, approve minutes of the board meeting of April 12th, 2023, and item 8B, approve expenditures of item B1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
So moved.
I'll second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Scrivener, Director Itnier,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 9, Water Resources Managers Report, and that will be with Stetson and Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Boy, got to Water Resource Manager fast. So I'm gonna try and not be the person that makes this a record short meeting. So I'll keep this fairly short. As we have in the past few meetings, we provide a written Water Resource Manager report. I'm just gonna hit some highlights. But first of all, which is not in the report, I just wanna report to the board that we continue to coordinate with the TAC, the members, which are limited as they are. We continue to coordinate with them, along with the CMP and the modeling group, which is doing a separate item, but they are connected because some of the activities of the CMP and the modeling group are also related to work we're doing on the TAC, which are related to the GSP and the update on the GSP. So I just want to let the board know that we send out regular updates, reasonably regular updates to the TAC on where we are on certain items, and working with April an update on where we are on items and our schedule to address certain items which are mostly related to the GSP and some of the recommended corrective actions, the things we're doing. It was just sent out this week to the TAC. And if anybody on the board would like to see it, just email me or April, and we'll send it to you. So it was just an update. So that's just a separate item on housekeeping on what we're doing with the TAC. For the Water Resource Manager report, it's written, it's in your packet, and it should be part of the board packet, so everybody's got it. Just some quick highlights. Money's important. I'll let you know that on Prop 1 update, we are currently waiting for about $55,000 from DWR. One item has been approved, 2 items are still under review, but it's totals about $55,000. The Prop 68, which was a smaller grant, same situation. We're waiting on about $31,000 from the state there. As you know, both of those grants had retentions, and we have a request in for our retentions, which for both of those propositions, which totals about $225,000. Don't see any problems why we wouldn't get it. All of that $225,000, essentially all of it, was related to approved invoices. So it's just money they held back. So it's just processing at DWR. So we've got another $225,000 coming from the state related to Prop 1 and Prop 68. For the SIGNA implementation round 1, the grant we've got for the pipeline work, we have an invoice in for about right at $333,000 for work that's been done. And we're waiting on a review of DWR and payment of that invoice. We feel fairly confident everything should be fine. It's a very similar process as Prop 1, Prop 68. The format and the forms are all the same, so we've submitted it. We're just waiting on DWR review. The next submittal on that grant was due on May 31st, so we're currently working on that. There were 2 other applications submitted. The round 2, there's an application in for almost $9 million. We're waiting for the state to review that application. And under the Urban Community Drought Relief Program, we got two grant applications that total about $10.5 million. And again, we are waiting on the state. There actually was a revised application based upon state staff input on our initial application. Recycled water program, on the alternatives analysis, it's essentially been completed. It's been released, the tech memo on the alternatives analysis, the report, the final tech memo has been released. Both the water district and the city have received copies. So if any of the board members related to the water district or the city haven't seen it, you can certainly ask your representative or you can ask the GA. Bureau of Reclamation, the feasibility study, we've reported on the past, just an update. They have it, they've looked at it. Initial review said it contains everything that's required for a feasibility study from the Bureau of Rec, which is needed in place for us to get Bureau of Rec funding for the pipeline. And there's a deadline for the Bureau of Reclamation to complete their review by June 6th. So less than a month away, we should hear something from the Bureau of Rec on a final review of that feasibility study. For the imported water project, the initial assignment, which was the alignment study, is done. And the study is either posted or soon will be posted to the website. The other work that's being done, including design services, the right-of-way services, and the right-of-way, and the environmental service, the CEQA compliance, NEPA compliance. They are all underway. We are having biweekly coordination meetings with the consultants. I can tell you from my perspective, the consultants are paying very close attention to this project and very close attention to the fact that we have a tight schedule to try to complete work and expend the grant money within the limits that we have. We have not yet made a determination that we cannot meet that deadline with the work we're trying to get done. As soon as we do make a determination that we are not going to be able to make that deadline, we will be working with Capital Corps to try to get it extended. It's not just a simple request with DWR. I think there may be legislation that may need to be done to extend that deadline. But we haven't determined yet there's a need for that. In the written report, we provide a couple of sections that are important if you want to review it and get up to speed. And the sections include at the end of each one, what our next steps are with bullet points on what our next steps are for each of the consultants and what our next milestones are, which are obviously related to the next step, but we do set some milestones on things we need to have done and what those dates are. So all three of those consultants are covered under the water resource manager's report with detail. Shallow well mitigation program, it's listed because it's an ongoing program. It was submitted. I think everybody knows it was submitted to the PAC. The PAC has provided some comments. I think they're still reviewing. There's still more input they want to provide back on implementation procedures, certainly on efforts to consolidate some of these smaller water systems. So that'll be part either this month or upcoming part of David's PAC report. As we move on, we're going into the items related to Jean's work. I think Jean is there in person. I think she is. Is she there?
Yes, Jean is here.
Jean is there. I think Jean's just going to let you know what's in the written water resource management report. And then she does have a very short, we're going to keep it very short, PowerPoint on an important topic, which are the LA DWP emergency releases on the LA aqueduct and what's going on in some of the record keeping, monitoring she's doing. So Jean, thank you very much. If you're ready. There she is.
Good morning, members of the board and the public. In your original packet, it had a outdated update, and then you'll see after that April update, the May update is present. So that's the one that I'll be addressing. For data collection, we set up additional data loggers to collect more frequent data in the field for the LADWP releases. Most of those are concentrated near the Freeman Wash, where the greatest release has been, but also another data logger was close to Indian Wells Canyon. We've coordinated surface water quality sampling with the water district. They had staff going out to each of the releases, so we collected surface water quality samples on April 17th. We just received the results as of Friday. We'll still be working those through, and you'll be presented with those results next board meeting. Telemetry equipment was installed in 5 of the Navy wells. That was a coordination with the Navy staff, and that was that access agreement we had been working on. Now those are in place. We've been continuing to do coordination with the Bureau of Land Management for right-of-way access agreements to the existing monitoring wells that did not have access agreements to them, including the USBR wells that were drilled in the 1990s. We're doing ongoing discussions regarding access agreements with BLM, and we are preparing Navy COSO projects to coordinate with the Navy for monies for the fiscal year 2024 to fill in data gaps. For the GSP model configuration plan, we have been continuing to meet with DRI on the model update. How the process goes with the management plan is we work through things with DRI on the actual technical part of the model development, and then we review that with the technical modeling group for approval and move through the process that way. We are still on schedule for having a calibrated model this year, so that would give us support for the 5-year update next year. For the subflow from Rose Valley to Indian Wells Valley, we reached 600 feet as of Thursday after drilling through 91 feet of rock. It took a while to get through the basalt. Then we had alluvial fan deposits to depth, with the last 30 feet being boulders. They're constructing the well with casing today. So we'll know more about that project, and I'll keep you updated with each month. Status updates were sent to the TAC and the Navy, which is part of the agreement, the cooperative agreement with the Navy. And if we go to the presentation slide, I'm now going to present the LADWP releases. So the releases were started on March 29th at the Freeman Wash, and it continues through present. I have not spoken directly to LADWP, so I'm not sure how long, but the general consensus is that it'll be July, August, that these releases will be being continued. LADWP staff provide daily email updates on the releases. They provide it as a CFS, a cubic feet per second. And from that, we produce a volume. So these volume numbers are draft. We don't have exactly the minute of each release. So just know that these numbers are draft, but they are definitely within the ballpark. We've also been having coordination calls with the water district and other interested people, just sharing monitoring information, observations, and any data that we have. This is important. The water district has more staff that is physically out in that area where the releases are. They monitor how far the surface water flow has gone with dates and time. For the monitoring plan, we have background monitoring in place, and I will show you a map of that. And then the surface water quality samples were collected. Part of this is to see if we can see almost like a tracer signature of the water. Surface water will have a different general chemistry than the native groundwater. So in the future, the Groundwater Authority collects groundwater quality samples for general chemistry every fall. And we actually had a more robust sampling collection that included the El Paso Basin last fall. So we will be comparing how that water has changed when we collect it again this fall. And this water quality sampling directly from the aqueduct release water will give us an indication of that. Next slide. So here are some pictures of the releases. These were collected by Ken Silliman of the Water District when he collected the water quality samples. This is not what they all look like right now. Two of the releases are no longer being released from. That's the Boulder Draw, the upper right picture, and the Bird Spring, which is the lower left picture. Boulder Draw was turned off in mid to late April, and Bird Spring was turned off just last Friday. If you look at the pictures, the ones on the left are the ones that are all being released to the south, and then they're going into the drainages. Those are drainage pathways, not necessarily that the water has filled all those channels, but it is where the water would flow to. So the El Paso is on the left. On the right, those are the northern basins. Those come out of the Sierras, and they sort of peter out before they get to 395 or just after they're in 395. And currently, it's just the Indian Wells one that you can observe. If you go to the next slide. So here are some calculations, just so we have some numbers. The average daily release when water is being released. So you get a sense of the size of the release and the dates that it was released. So Boulder Draw, that release was on the average of 14.5 CFS for through April 18th. Indian Wells is still through present. So this is different than your packet. I had somebody update the graphs and data through May 9th, which is yesterday, so that you have the most recent data. Indian Wells is almost 5 CFS. Freeman Wash is 23.5 CFS, and currently they're above 30 CFS. Sage Canyon is about 6 CFS, and Bird Springs used to be 12 CFS. Next slide. Here's another way to look at the data. So this is volumes. These are acre feet. We deal mostly with acre feet. The upper graph is showing the northern two basins. So the tannish brown color at the top graph that goes along, that's Indian wells. How much volume is being released each day? And the total of all of those since Indian wells started is about 340 acre feet. Boulder Draw, notice how it was released at a higher rate, but then it stopped. It has released about 490 acre feet at that location. The El Paso sub-area, the Freeman Wash is the largest. That's the blue on this set of bars. But you can see that it started on the March 29th, and then it jumped up, and then it jumped up some more, and it even has jumped up further with the latest releases. It has about 900 acre feet that has been released from that point. Sage Canyon has about 363 acre feet. It's the green, and it is a smaller release, but yet it's constant, pretty much from when it started on April 9th. Bird Springs has been turned off. That's the red on this bar graph, but you can see relative to the other releases the size that it is, and it accounted for 830 acre feet. The total, and I rounded this to the nearest 10 acre feet. If you add the numbers, it'll be a little bit different, but 35, is that right? Oh, that number should have been updated. Oh, no, that's correct. It's 3,570 acre feet has been released so far. Yes?
This slide says 39.
Oh, good, that's correct.
Yeah, so
I guess I got the wrong one here. It's 39.
39,
30, thank you. I couldn't get it through the heads that are right there. Thanks. Okay, thank you, that's the correct number. The one on my slide looked wrong. Okay, continuing to the next slide. Here's another way to look at it, another graph. So these are cumulative volumes over time. And two of the graphs are shortened, and that's because the release stopped. But you can see this is another way to look at the relative releases from these basins. And the next slide. This is the monitoring plan. We can't say anything definitive right now. What we need to look at is it takes time if the groundwater is going to respond. The general conceptual model is that the water table is down 300, in some places 400 feet. So it may not ever hit the water table, that it'll just sort of disperse and then it'll be evaporated off near the surface. If we were to see it, it'll show up in the data loggers. The last time the water was released was in 2017, but we had not collected water until, any kind of water level data until October, so it was never seen. If we were to see it, like it might happen between some faulted zones, we would see it in a data logger data. That data is collected every hour, and it's just out there collecting a water pressure every hour, and then we'll collect that data and see, did it see a response to any of this water? We do have some telemetry equipment out there, but it has not seen any response yet. But it is not right next to the releases. So hopefully by we will be going out next week to collect some of these data logger data just as an interim and a check. For next board meeting, we'll show you whatever that result is and if we see anything. And it might take months. I have no idea, but currently we haven't seen it, but we do know that the water has been has not made it the full flow path. So if you look at the Freeman Gulch, and then you're coming back around to Little Dixie Wash, the flow has gone a little bit under Brown Road, but it has not even reached the Navy base. And it seems to have sort of stalled there. And then now we're releasing a little bit less with Bird Spring not contributing. So we are watching, but in the monitoring program, we have 15 existing data loggers. And then the telemetry equipment, I believe, is in the yellow, and the orange are just a straight data logger that you have to go to the well and download so that you can get that data. We will continue to coordinate with the water district on different things with their staff. And we'll keep reporting to you on what we see out in from our data that we're collecting. Any questions?
I have a question. So would you be able to differentiate between water, I mean, that would be coming down from the north through here and versus the water that would be coming in from the south? And would there be any way to differentiate between which direction it came from if you're collecting data from these? I think you're collecting data from these three
Right,
sources.
right.
And
There's a large fault that we're calling it the Freeman Fault. That red line you see on that map, that's a fault trace between the two basins. And those two waters will be staying separate until that water crosses over by Little Dixie. Gotcha. But, yeah, given the time, the residents' time that it would take to travel there, subsurface, we will not be seeing it.
And do you anticipate being able to register water coming closer to where the source of release is off of those data loggers? Or do you think that water would even make it into the ground there, or would it travel? I mean, you're going to be measuring.
Right, we will see.
You'll be measuring from both those points.
Yes,
so.
we will be measuring all of that.
Okay.
And then put the picture together once we see what the data is.
I have a question. Gene, in 2017, the number that I saw was 1,920 acre feet was the total release.
Okay.
Is that, do you know what the number was?
I don't know that one.
Okay.
1,900.
Because if
I'm
that's-
just writing that one down as a good number
Okay.
to have, too.
If that's the case, where you're at currently, or where DWP is currently at 3,800 or 3,900.
Right.
They're double already what was coming in 2017. Of course,
Right.
we all know that, the Sierras just got hit hard, with water. Do you think that it's time to create a plan to capture this water as opposed to letting it run off? I mean, certainly it's good for the environment, to just let water be there, but
Right.
but for the benefit of the water users here.
Well, things that have been talked about in the meetings, or the meetings that we've had is, and maybe, Chuck, you can address it more than I can, is building something that would slow it down to recharge it. And will it reach the water table? We don't know. But could it find, it's always good to try different things. Part of this is how often will this happen when you build an infrastructure for something, if it's only going to occur once every 15, 20 years or 30 years, how do you warrant the cost? But as a scientist, I am always for finding out, well, how does that work? Can we slow it down? Can we get it in one place that it would recharge? And does it really recharge? I mean, that's the question we don't really have. Conceptually, we haven't seen it, but can we find data that shows it?
Yeah, and I think your explanation of watching the data loggers for a response, which is basically engineering talk for a change. You're
Right.
looking for a change in the water levels, basically,
Right.
at those monitoring wells. And you haven't seen that yet, but there may be delayed response as it trickles through all the way down to 300 and 400 feet, right?
Right, and part of responses is there's going to be a lot of things happening this year, right? There's more rain. So did that response come from the natural rain? Could it be that there was less pumping because there was more rain? And then that would be a release, that would be a change. So we will take the data and have to look at all the different things that it's responding to. But yeah, the fundamental thing is what's happening with the groundwater, the water levels in the groundwater aquifer.
Okay, and so if the percolation doesn't work because envirotranspiration negates the runoff,
Right.
then the other option would be what, injection?
Right, it would have to be injection or something, yeah, some other way to get it to the
Okay.
water table, right?
Or
All
direct
right.
use.
Or direct use of it, yeah,
Direct use? Did you say direct use?
of the
Yes.
water, right.
Yeah, I see, okay.
Just to add to your question about planning, and the Water District has been giving reports on this at their board meetings. We've been working with Don and his staff since this thing started. And there has been discussions, a lot of discussions about how, as Gene pointed out, how to slow the water down, make some improvements out there, direct the water so we can get a more effective percolation, if that's possible. Those discussions have included the Water District certainly and the GA, and also BLM and California and Fish and Wildlife for making any alterations out there. Where they're at right now, to my knowledge, if the Water District has more, that's great. To my knowledge, where they are right now is, it seemed like the shortest path to get something done in the short term was to limit the activities to Water District-owned property, to limit the permitting and the regulatory requirements, and they're continuing to work on that. The other alternative is more the most effective properties, which might be BLM land, which is a longer term. But in answer to your question about a plan, yes, we are talking about trying to put something in place, especially, okay, we all know how it is in California, especially on the regulatory and the permitting side. Doing the physical facility and having things ready physically is not near as a big deal as trying to get the regulatory requirements addressed. So one of the goals here is to try to get in front of that. It probably will not take place for this release because the regulatory system between the BLM and Fish and Wildlife it takes quite a bit of time to get it done, especially on BLM land. But working on it our intent would be to result in a document and a plan to be able to address this in the future and be able to respond more quickly, even if it is only 1 in 10 or 15 years, whatever it is. So I hope that helps. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I think that's the end of the Water Resource Manager report, unless there's more questions.
I have a couple comments I'd like to make, and Tom, I appreciate your questions. The Water District has worked very hard to try to do something. We have met opposition through state Fish and Wildlife. So it's really frustrating to me personally because I know there's so much we could be doing. But I think this is the time that we need to step up and get our act together where we can say, okay, we want to work on some percolation ponds where we can drill some shallow wells and we can actually achieve percolation or storage or work with DWP through some kind of a banking project or something. But we need to step up, and the Water District is being very proactive in that. To put it in perspective, Gene, I appreciate your comments and in showing the footage, but the water that's flowing into this valley is a large amount of water. 22 cubic feet per second is 10,000 gallons of water per minute that's coming into this valley through one release. So there's a lot of water that we could be doing something with if we can think ahead in the future, because we don't know if it's going to happen again in 5 years, 2 years, or it may not happen again. But right now I know that we're losing the benefit of this water. And so that bothers me. And if we can do something, we need to do it as quick as we can. So if anybody from State and Fish and Wildlife, we need to build a pond and let us drill a shallow well so we can percolate some of it. That's it.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, hearing none, do we have any public comment from the floor?
Judy Decker, Vice President, Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District, member of the PAC, former Water District Director. When I was on the Water Board some 30 years ago, the Water District was first starting to develop its southwest well field. At the direction of the consulting engineer, Chuck Krieger, the district developed an area to try and see what percolation would take place. Water was run, I can't tell you now for how long, but it was months. That water never reached the groundwater. So this needs to be carefully thought out. The costs need to be looked at because you've already experienced the issue of injection wells with your reclaimed water project. Water that is injected into the groundwater has to be pure. Water that is surface water runoff won't be pure. So you'll have to build a treatment facility.
Thank you, Judy. Any other public comment from the floor? Seeing none, we'll move to the phone lines. We do have a caller. Caller, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Renee Westelusk. I just have a question regarding the 5 release points. If the water starts reaching the base, are the northern release points the ones they might shut off first to protect the base from damage? If it got to that point, what I'm asking is if there's certain points that are more directly affecting the base on the releases. Like it looks like the northern ones to me would probably reach the base first versus the El Paso sub-area release points. If you could address that, if you can. Thank you.
My understanding is it will be Dixie Wash. Dixie Wash is the most, so that will be coming up from the south. It's flowing, and that's where the greatest releases are. And that's also where the infrastructure is for the Navy base. So the flow line that you see that sort of runs into the center, that would be the flow that would be of concern. And that would have to be coordinated with LADWP if they see a release or something that would cause harm or damage. Does that answer your question?
Director Griffin, we had, in the past meeting, I think we had a brief discussion about, the coordination between Water District, because you guys are working on that directly with the naval installation and with LADWP. And that's, you can confirm that, I think, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, and so it's,
Right.
I think, definitely being looked at.
Yeah, we definitely, and that's, the plan we submitted was to try to slow some of the water. I personally don't know if it's gonna work, but that is the idea, to try to help the Navy and prevent damage to the snort track. And
Yeah, so just to clarify, we are working with, I know Don had asked for a letter for the Navy to provide just general impacts, and we are concerned, and we're tracking it daily. We get a copy of the LADWP report, so we are paying close attention to it. And we're going to be providing that letter to the Water District here shortly, probably by the end of today, so they can submit it as part of their package to Fish and Wildlife.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And then also to let the public know, the water is flowing. It's a large release, but the water is coming, and then sometimes it recedes a little bit, depending on the heat and the amount that it is soaking in. So some days it backs up a little bit. So it's not like it's just going to hit all of a sudden and wipe something out. So there is going to be time to prepare for it, and the Navy can take steps to deter the path a little bit. easier than we can as a private agency because we can't alter it, the path of a stream.
Very good. Okay, any further public comments from the phones? Seeing none, thank you, Gene, for a great presentation. I'm excited about this aspect of it. I mean, it's nice to be able to see the data and when it comes out as far as, if we can track where that water goes, and it's going to help, I think, with a lot of the research on the basin and areas that it, may percolate into or not percolate into. Where does it go, or does it show up, and back to be able to use that water in the future, what are other options, like Judy said, the costs, weighing in costs, if there is any means of, capitalizing on this, we want to do it. And anyway, we thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to item number 10, General Manager's Report. This will be with Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your packet, you have your financial reports through April, end of April. And at this point, let me give you an update on the audit. We do have an audit. It's actually in draft, but we've had a chance to review it. It looks great. We were hoping to have it for this agenda, but we just couldn't get the finalized audit in time for the agenda, and we didn't have the opportunity to get our audit, the partner from Brown Armstrong, to be here today to make a presentation. But you will have it. It is set up and scheduled with the auditor for our June meeting. So I'm happy to say that we'll have an audit presentation in June. And again, the draft that we've seen is a really good, clean audit, no findings. So happy to report that. Also in your packet is our Capital Corps Group monthly report. I think pretty much similar items that they've been working on, but we're going to include a legislative update today. And I can't tell who's on the call, but Michael or Jeff, if you could walk through the legislative update for us, I think the board would like to hear that.
Carol, it's Michael McKinney. Good afternoon, members of the board. In your packet, you have a staff report concerning the legislation that we are following, as well as how we notify the authority and the board relative to priority legislation. In addition to the priority legislation, we, of course, are monitoring things of interest that don't rise to the level of priority and provide the staff regular updates. In terms of priority legislation, there's currently 5 bills that we are tracking. All of them are state of California bills. I'd like to run through them just quickly. Assembly Bill 444, currently pending in the Assembly Appropriations Committee, is passed by unanimous consent out of the Policy Committee, creates a grant program called the California Defense Community Infrastructure Program. It is a precursor grant to the federal DCIP. This was a piece of legislation last year that both the authority and the city of Ridgecrest supported. It did not make it through the legislative process. We were able to bring that back as AB 444, as well as some modifications. And it is currently there before you. Our recommendation is to continue support of that legislation and to seek passage of the legislation along with a very large coalition that we have helped develop at this particular point in time. Are there any questions regarding AB 444 before I move on?
I see no questions.
Thank you, sir. AB 560 by Assemblymember Bennett deals with groundwater adjudication. This piece of legislation basically asks the court to seek a non-binding opinion from the State Water Resources Control Board prior to entering a judgment on groundwater adjudications. It does not substantially change the modification, but it does allow basically the board to come in and to opine, if you will, on the various aspects of a potential adjudication that is going forward. It is sponsored by the California Alliance for Family Farmers, or CAF, which is essentially representing small agriculture interests throughout the state of California, as well as some environmental groups. It passed two policy committees, the Water Parks and Wildlife Committee by a vote of 9-4, and the Assembly Judiciary Committee by a vote of 7-2, is currently pending in the Assembly Committee on Appropriations. Our recommendation to the board is to support with amendments. There is a letter in your packet for consideration for approval and signature. We have been in discussions and preliminary talks with Assembly Member Bennett on this particular legislation. Excuse me. It does have significant opposition from large agriculture interests at this particular point, but it is moving. The words suspense file that you will see next to the Assembly Committee on Appropriations simply means that it is pending based upon the state budget being passed. Nothing that has a fiscal impact of above $150,000 can move forward out of Appropriations Committee until such time as the state budget is passed. That is scheduled for next month. Any questions concerning that piece of legislation?
I have a couple questions for you. First, I'd like to go to the letter that you wrote. If you go to the second paragraph, and it starts out describing the basin as critically overdrafted, I have an issue with the basin is involved in an adjudication proceeding which seeks to determine the water right allocations between large agriculture interest, cooling water for power plant operations at an industrial mining operation, the U.S. Navy, and municipal water utilization. It's my opinion that that is a slam to the residents of Searles Valley. They're an important member of our community, and to call them out as a cooling water use only, and that's what that water is being used for, I think that's just for the GA to even put that out as a slam to the people that work in Trona. I have family that live there, and I just think that needs to be removed. And then also, there's a couple different ways this is written, but I, for one, would not support this. And then also, it says that you call it out and you describe AB 779. So are we linking 779 with 560? And then
there are
also
similar provisions in AB 779 to 560, yes.
Okay. So you are calling that out. And then one more was you said at the very last paragraph before you quoted in the sponsors, it says, to end that, we respectfully offer the following amendment to AB 650. So is there an AB 650 bill also?
No, that's in typo. I apologize.
Oh, okay. And then at the bottom paragraph, it's on behalf of member agencies of the IWVGA, we respectfully request your consideration for our amendments to AB 779 is introduced on February 13, 2023. So I would like that removed if this letter is sent, because as a member agency, the Water District would not support this letter. And that's all of my comments.
I suppose in just a quick reaction to at least a comment about the Searles Valley water, this board has, my understanding, has conceptualized two different water right issues there, and we've attempted to address those differences through our regulatory proceedings. Specifically, the water for the commercial operations being distinguished from the water for the potable use operations. So I'm not sure that the statement there is inaccurate, but perhaps it's not complete.
Well, there's no, me understanding water, and that's what I do, there's no way for the water to be ran potable unless Searles Valley is in operations. There's not enough usage that goes through the line. If it was treated here or anything was done to it here, by the time it got there, you would have bacteria issues. And so Searles Valley is vital to providing water to the residents. And I would argue that fact with anybody.
Yeah, I think we're going to probably start rehashing the conversation we had back when we were involved with the Searles Valley question more directly on this board level, because there was substantial conversation about the ability or inability of the potable users to continue to receive water if the plant shut down. And I think Steve would be the best one to recall the specifics of the engineering question there, but I'm not sure that's actually particularly relevant to this letter at this point. So,
And it's off the agenda.
yeah, so I suppose it's maybe just not a complete statement. Is that your issue with it?
I just don't want them singled out. It's just, it makes them sound like it's just for a cooling tower. Well, it's used for a lot more than just cooling towers. And I know that, and I understand that. I've worked there. I mean, it's not just used for cooling towers. If you want to list, if you continue to send the letter, I would hope that you guys would say the community of Trona and a chemical plant or something, but just to call it out as cooling tower usage, it's a slam, in my opinion.
Well, and perhaps Mr. McKinney can clarify, but I believe the last clause of that sentence covers.
The municipal water.
Yeah.
But there is no municipal if there's not Searles. I mean, it's the municipal is ran by Searles Valley, so there would not, that wouldn't include them in that comment.
That seems to be a position that Searles has unsuccessfully so far taken in their litigation, but that has not been the opinion of the GA on that topic.
Okay. And it may not be, but it is my opinion. So just as one person, I would like to either change it or, I mean, you guys are going to vote, so that's your option. But I'm asking, as a board member, I don't feel that we should just label it as that. I think we need to say the resident, it provides the water for Trona and for a chemical plant, not just, it makes it sound like it's insignificant, and it's not. It's huge for our community. There's 400 jobs.
Yeah, understood. So, Mr. McKinney, if you could chime in, is that your intention with regard to the last clause of that sentence and municipal water utilization? That would cover the potable uses in Trona, or?
Yes, the letter was written with the aspect that you, Director Vallejo, have indicated that there is a separation between the water usage that is dealing with the municipality and dealing with the cooling water for the coal plant.
And then on the second note that you raised in terms of on behalf of the member agencies of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority, if the water district doesn't support, I agree, we should modify that sentence.
Correct.
Perhaps it's just on behalf of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority.
That's fine.
That's for discussion.
No, I'm satisfied with the language that's in it, as, differentiating between the industrial and the municipal water aspects, and I'm okay with the change of, the last sentence. And so, any other board members have any input?
I just want to make it, can I chime in? I just want to make it clear that the position that Capital Corps is advocating in this letter is advancing the GA's interests in the litigation.
Correct.
That might be contrary to the water district's interests.
Well, and I'm in favor of where Capital Corps is, the direction that they're moving with this, and so I'd like to see us continue to move forward with it. Michael, do you have any other, I don't know that you were complete with your presentation there. Do you want to continue on?
No, that is all regarding AB 560, AB 779 by Assemblymember Wilson.
Michael, hold on one sec. Michael, I just want to make it, Director Griffin asked that the letter be pulled. I think the staff should get some clear direction if it's the intention of the board to continue with that letter. We're not asking for a formal vote, but maybe poll the board or something to make sure we understand what the intent of the board is in light of that request.
I'd say my intent is to move forward with the letter with the change to the last sentence, the second to last sentence of the letter itself.
Right. I think that pretty much reiterates what I had said prior. So any other comments from other board members?
I just say I agree with that.
Okay. Tim Etnier, do you have any further comment?
No, makes sense to me. I agree with the others.
Okay, so we have 4 board members that are in favor and in the same direction to move forward with the letter, with the changes that were brought about by Director Vallejo. So
Thank you.
So with that, we will, I'll go back to the board one more time for any further comments. Hearing none, we'll bring it to the public for any public comment. Do we have any public comment from? Okay, let's go back. Michael McKinney, are you still with us?
I am, sir.
Okay. Did you have some further presentation?
Yes, AB 779, also on that list, dealing with groundwater adjudications by Assemblymember Wilson. We are recommending a neutral position on this at this particular time. However, amendments came forward to my desk yesterday and have been forwarded to staff for their review and Assemblymember Wilson's request. So we are reviewing those particular amendments at this particular point. This bill is also sponsored by CAF. It did pass Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife and Assembly Judiciary. It is pending in the Committee on Appropriations. Our recommendation or our request is just to direct the staff to take a look at the current amendments and to recommend or forward a position on behalf of the authority for that. The amendments may take us and maintain us to a neutral position at the best, or we'll have to come back and oppose that bill. I don't have direction at this point from staff. AB 1205. Oh, let me ask if there are any questions. I apologize. Are there any questions regarding AB 779?
If you could just quickly review, if you're aware off the top of your head, the prescription for pumping restrictions on groundwater during these proceedings?
So there are restrictions in both the proposed amendment and what was in the current 779 that basically said that while there is an adjudication that is ongoing, that the pumping restrictions related to the GSP would be enforced. That remains in the bill. In fact, it's actually a little more clear in the amendments that are forwarded. That has to be, and that there are no new pumpers added, essentially, beyond de minimis pumpers, of course, into the proceeding. Did that answer your question, Director?
Thank you.
Regarding AB 1205, Assemblymember Bauer-Kahn, this bill is actually pending on the Assembly floor at this point. Our recommendation, as you see in the letter, is oppose unless amended. This bill would prohibit transactions involving agriculture lands where any pooled money fund is included. In other words, if there is a public retirement fund, that would be included as a fixed income fund. If there is a publicly traded entity, a public corporation, or a cooperative that may be an agriculture interest, it would be prohibited. And then any REIT or real estate fund or public infrastructure fund, it would prohibit the sale of water by those entities. While it will not impact the current water transaction up in Dudley Ridge, it would prohibit future transactions that look like it. Dudley Ridge, of course, was an incorporated transaction, so it would fall under the publicly traded entities or public corporations ban at this particular point. We did ask for amendments in the Assembly Committee, basically exempting purchases for SGMA implementation or for public use. Those at this point have been denied. We are in negotiations to try and push for those amendments, but at this point in time, with the author not agreeing to take our amendments, we are recommending a formal oppose unless amended position and asking for the board's approval to begin lobbying that in the California State Senate. Any questions concerning 1205 or any comments concerning the letter that I can address?
Yeah, if there's no others.
Go ahead.
What does the author expect to happen to the market for water with this bill?
The author is trying to prohibit essentially profiteering in the marketplace or where a foreign entity may purchase water and hold those water rights or sell those water rights as an exorbitant fund. So she is trying to prohibit essentially the commoditization by Wall Street or other entities for coming in and purchasing California's water rights, sitting on them for a period of time, and then turning around and selling them at an exorbitant price. The bill is a little strange from a legal standpoint in that it doesn't prohibit the purchase, it prohibits the sale, which brings a lot of questions concerning the constitutionality of the bill. She is also trying to stop for-profit water corporations that are buying and selling water rights at this particular time. That's her intent. It is not to include us per se as a sustainable under the SIGMA provisions as a groundwater sustainability agency. However, it has ensnared us in the current version of the bill. We have confirmed that with the committee's counsel. We've run the Dudley Ridge transaction by them and said, would this prohibit any future transaction that looked like this? And the answer came back as yes.
I mean, it seems like on the one hand, it would be a good thing for agencies like ours long-term to not have to come up against a market of a very scarce resource and the cost that would be associated with that. But also, on the other hand, we couldn't buy the water. I'm not sure how that...
That's the part that's bothering me, because I see where with foreign entities coming in and buying, large tracts of land and pumping the water and shipping the products out, to the, we're selling the water at, greatly, but yet a reasonable purchase, it seems like it inhibits. And so
I don't know what to do with that one besides go with the recommendation.
I go with recommendations as to oppose at the moment, and yeah.
We're looking for a carve-out for us.
I'm sorry?
So the goal is to get a carve-out for our purchases and then leave the rest of it for other people to fight about.
Correct.
That is our current position, and the way the letter is drafted at this point is not to comment on the bill's intent, but to go after a specific carve-out. We may have to amend or change that amendment language that we are proposing based upon the rejection by the assembly member. We're working with staff at this particular point. But as of right this minute, staff is not moving on it and not returning our phone calls quick enough or our meetings. So my opinion is that we need to fully oppose the bill. With no further questions, Senate Bill 315 by Senator Hurtado, dealing with groundwater sustainability agencies. Our recommendation on this bill is neutral and no public position. We're bringing it to your attention because it does impact SIGMA and GSAs. But essentially, there are two main amendments to this right now, and it would require any groundwater sustainability agency that hires a third-party consulting firm to ensure that the integrity of the science being used to develop GSP is protected and the data is not sold. That is one aspect of the bill. The other aspect of the bill is to somewhat suspend the GSAs that were found in deficiency and were moved to State Water Resources Control Board for enforcement actions. And then it establishes a $50 million fund for critical facilities subsidence mitigation in those areas to be used specifically so that those GSAs can meet their requirements. I was surprised that this bill actually made it through the committee 10-0, but it is pending in Senate Committee on Appropriations at this point. A $50 million appropriation or even authorization given the state's budget is a pretty difficult lift at this particular point. From a personal standpoint, I would say that it's probably not good to have a specific fund that is specific just to the Central Valley and those GSAs that were found deficient. On the other hand, I don't think that there are other portions of this bill that are particularly harmful to Indian wells, and hence the neutral position recommendation. Any questions concerning that piece of legislation?
Any questions from the board? I see no questions, so go ahead.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions as you open it up to public comment.
Okay, we'll start with public comment from the floor. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, any public comment on the phones? Okay, none. Any further comment from the board? So do we need a favorable direction or any further? Okay. Thank you, Michael McKinney, for your report, and we will move on to the next item. This brings us to item number 11, the PAC report.
We did have a meeting this month, and we had two big topics to bite off. And I'm going to read these because we had to carefully craft these with staff, the questions. The first one was acknowledging that the wells are expected to last several decades and have several owners during its lifetime. What would the PAC, the Policy Advisory Committee, consider to be a fair requirement on the demonstration of well maintenance? And this question is obviously relevant to the shallow well mitigation program, not the emergency relief program. And further information was an example of a consideration is how does the GA now enforce some maintenance requirement and documentation of that requirement when in the past there would have been little, if any, incentive for well owners to maintain such records. So a key to it is what are fair and reasonable expectations post-SGMA for people to present in order to be eligible and have a reasonable expectation under this program. And we had a very robust discussion, about an hour and a half, as a matter of fact. And there were 6 general areas of agreement that the PAC came down to, and then some actions that we accepted and are moving forward on. I'll summarize the 6 areas. Are generally, we said there's a requirement to clarify the key terms and definitions and define those in the policy itself, or some addendum to the policy for clarity for a shallow well owner and what all the terms mean exactly. The second item was that, a lot of the expectation of mitigation is based on either water quality or water level affected by the continuing drop in the basin's water table due to until we get the basin into sustainability. And particular well circumstances or factors that might bear on that are depth of water, overall depth, well life expectation, age, maintenance, casing condition, et cetera. And there's a lot of them that affect that and can have effects on maintenance. Number 3, there may be, and this is key, and this I would refer to this in our discussion earlier about the communication and engagement plan, that we may identify key things that need to be communicated to the public and the shallow well owners specifically what their expectations may be of data that or documentation that they need to keep that probably wasn't relevant pre-SGMA. And that could go to as far as recommendations for agencies that have administrative or authority to control perhaps real estate documentation of well condition or documents to be transferred upon ownership, or at least disclosure. Some kind of consideration. Those are the things we're contemplating that we're going to take up in a subcommittee. Number 4, consolidation consideration should be given to recommending well registration, which this group has talked about before, and that was brought back up, that maybe we should consider this as a requirement. If you're going to receive mitigation or ask for mitigation, you need to, in fact, be registered as a well owner. I think we rejected that requirement early on in the process in an attempt to get to closure and deal with the public relations. But that may be a reasonable expectation. We're going to discuss that. Number 5, there are some consideration that this committee would like to have a member of the TAC or members of the TAC to advise on some of the technical aspects of this in order to make our policy recommendations. So that's part of the definition clarity concept. And finally, number 6, as we were deciding to form a subcommittee, we thought that this first go-around of expectations would be best served by folks that have some familiarity, experience, or knowledge with shallow wells and private well and collectives, perhaps. So we're going to make a request. We're forming a subcommittee, and we've got 3 members that are all or have been shallow well owners that are forming that committee, but they have requested, and the full PAC committee validates that request, that we have a TAC member a representation assigned on that committee. And we realize it can't be a joint committee because there is not a full quorum eligible TAC. It is of not the sufficient membership to do that, but we'd like to have a TAC member be at least advisory, if not a voting member of the committee when they discuss this and bring back their recommendations to the full committee. They are not going to make the final recommendations. The committee is themselves. So the PAC agreed to form an ad hoc subcommittee, and it's Judy Decker, Lyle Fisher, and Wes Katzenstein, and they were tasked to develop these recommendations in 3 general areas. What are reasonable and fair expectations for documentation by a well owner considering both pre- and post-SGMA timeframes? And the second one, again, is that need potential that we identified for communication and engagement opportunities that might be needed and included to things that are not within the GA authority that we can advise and communicate, or go as far as asking member entities or advocating for other entities to make changes in regulations, perhaps, in some documentation that's required to be passed down or kept on wells. The third area was what are those recommended terms that we clarify in the exact definitions, and some of those can be in the policy itself as well as with regards to our recommendations. So that's the action we took on that first task. We had an equally spirited discussion and wide-ranging on the second task, which I'll read for clarity again. Acknowledging that private domestic wells are by their nature shallower than deeper municipal wells, how should the GA board handle this issue in light of potential for state consolidation grant money? And the related consideration is a state policy from the State Water Resources Control Board, which seeks to consolidate these types of wells into larger systems, as evidenced by the Dune 3 and Hometown consolidations that are presently being considered, and providing up to full grant coverage for the expenses of doing so. So that's in light of the state consolidation grant money. Again, we had a wide-ranging discussion that on one side said this is a water district issue because they're the executive agency and the ones that are required to do it and would bear the costs, which could be substantial, depending, especially for collectives in this valley, and there are some that would be costly, in fact. And on the other side of the argument is the fact that the Groundwater Authority under SGMA is the responsible agency for sustainability in the basin and accountable for the mitigation of adverse consequences. Declining water levels or quantity quality in the basin until the basin is brought into sustainability. And therefore, the Groundwater Authority must at least consider this option, and especially in view of rather than having all the stakeholders of the Groundwater Authority pay the costs to have the state grant. So some consideration should be given for it. So what we agreed to going forward ultimately was, and we punted slightly time-wise on this one also, in general, a top-level statement of support encouraging Groundwater Authority consideration of proactive consolidations where feasible and cost-effective under state grants with potential modifiers. That's a document that they've tasked the chair to develop prior to our next meeting and to circulate to the full PAC for consideration and finalization at that meeting. So there is no formal recommendation coming out of the PAC for this meeting, but that's the way we're generally leaning. It's probably going to be a top-level general statement that gives full flexibility to the Groundwater Authority and the Water District with regards to implementing this and taking into account several things, which I mentioned too, the cost effectiveness and ability to achieve state grants, weighed against, what are the costs to all the stakeholders in the valley that might not be covered by grants. And our next PAC meeting I'll circulate that out to all the members well in advance of it, and we'll come prepared to go through the details and arrive at an agreed-to statement from the committee. And the next PAC meeting, we are unable to meet in May. We'll be meeting at our regularly scheduled time, June 22nd. So that would be our next PAC meeting unless some urgent tasking comes from the board, in which case we'd schedule an ad hoc meeting. Any questions for me?
Any questions from the board?
I just have a couple comments. I want to first thank the PAC for looking at this and then also forming a subcommittee. I think it's very important that we do that. And if there's any action that the board can take today to help the PAC with adding a technical person to that, I think we should do that if it takes a board action to do that. And I think we should move forward with that so we have that information could be very helpful for them. And then I anticipate your report after your next meeting on the consolidation efforts.
So is that a request from?
It's a request from the committee made by the chair.
All right. And so in regards to the shallow well mitigation, are you going to be coming back with a more formal overview of that at the following subsequent meeting?
With regards to the second issue, the consolidation, or are you talking the first issue?
First issue.
That will be our goal, but there's a lot to be accomplished at that meeting, and the shallow well mitigation is a big subject. So in the past, like the communications plan, it took us a couple meetings to fully concur on our PAC committee as a whole statement of what we'd submit for the communications plan, an engagement plan, for example. It might take us 2 meetings is what I'm waffling on. But our target would be to get both of those things accomplished at the next meeting, but that's a heavy lift.
I have a question in regards to the request from the PAC. Do we need to get an approval from the board, and is that something that we can do today, or do we need to bring that back as an agenda item?
So the request is to have somebody from the Water Resources Manager's office at the next PAC meeting. Is that?
You want to clarify that, David?
It was a TAC member. Because the TAC is the technical advisory committee that mirrors the PAC for technical circumstances, and we are all advisory panels, but we can't impanel a joint committee because they don't form a quorum on their own. So when we did this the last time on the interconnect structure, we just had them as we formed a joint committee meeting, except it wasn't joint. We just had TAC members attending and contributing because we wanted to hear them, and you did.
So I think it's sufficient for the chair to so direct if that's the intention.
I would approve that. Yeah. So, does that complete your presentation?
Yes, unless you have any more questions.
Okay.
Or the public does.
Okay, do we have any further comments from the board? Do we have any public comment from the floor?
Judy Decker, PAC member. I'm greatly concerned about the second issue that David reported on. The Water District has has taken the responsibility since its existence of finding ways to get mutuals and co-ops to join their system if that is what they desire. Now, here's something for you to think about. There are many mutuals and co-ops in this valley. Many of them are in poor condition. Their wells are fine. They have not maintained or improved their infrastructure over the years. So you have these mutuals with maybe 50 houses attached to them with a 2-inch PVC line or steel line. I will remind those few of you who live here that when the Water District acquired the Ridgecrest Heights system, the problem wasn't the wells, it was their delivery system in the upper part of Ridgecrest Heights. The pipeline was on the surface of the road and it was used boiler pipe from Trona. I saw it myself. But my concern is the GA has no ability to serve water. It has no experience in dealing with the state in water systems, but the Water District has. So rather than the GA doing this, the GA should be sending grant information to the Water District so that they can use it for these private systems that want to join the Water District. The other thing to think about is if the Water District, this is theoretical, but let's have the Water District take all of the mutual co-op systems south of 178. The Water District will have to put in more wells to accommodate those people because domestic wells do not meet the requirement of a public water system. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
I'd like to comment back to Judy if I could. I have some comments, and I wanted to wait until Mr. Janet gave his presentation next month when they brought the PAC's recommendation. But I do agree with Judy that it is the Water District's issue for consolidation. So I would request that any information that does come for grants be forwarded to the district because it is very expensive to consolidate and assume these. As she mentioned, the Ridgecrest Heights was Pinky Stark put in that system, and I worked on that system replacing it, and so it's very cost incurring to the district and to the people that have to make the connection. And as Judy mentioned, there obviously would be more cost and more wells that would need to be drilled for more storage. So I think it does belong in the district hands, but I would like to wait and see what the PAC comes up with their presentation to the board.
And I assume that the Water District is looking for grants on their own too, and
yes,
not relying just on the GA
absolutely.
to be the, the.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, this is Michael McKinney with Capital Corps. As you know, that we have the responsibility of looking over the pending state grants and referring those which we believe may have an impact The shallow well mitigation program is in our search criteria. Anything that might have an impact on that is provided to staff, including Steve and Carol, and council in order to review. We have brought reports to the board which identify those grants, and I have sent independently grant information over to Don just so that he is aware of the public information so that he has it as we're looking at it. It is on our radar screen. It is something that we continually look for and discuss internally. There have been several memorandums on it, but I'm happy to get with Don or anybody else and have a conversation on how to refine or better look for those types of grants.
Very good. Thank you, Michael.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go
And
ahead.
let me just add that Don Sadiva was at the PAC meeting as well, and he pointed out, and I just want to reiterate too, that that the state water board generally will provide that type of assistance because it's the state's policy to try to consolidate the smaller underprivileged systems into larger ones that can better handle compliance matters and drinking water regulations. And so the state really supports that type of consolidation. And they do offer that type of assistance through grants or through funding opportunities. And so it's not usually a costly endeavor to try to write a grant for consolidations. It's usually something that the state water board will help us with just upon request.
Mr. Chair, I'm concerned that we've gone pretty far on a very thin read as far as the agenda is concerned.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So did you have any other questions, Director?
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I answer
Go ahead,
one
Dave.
thing from Director Griffin's benefit? The reason we agreed only to a top-level encouragement statement was indeed partly based on those issues that Judy and you just brought up. And that's why specifically we also added the words cost-effective. We don't want to be, well, we aren't a decision board. We aren't a directive board. We didn't want to recommend to you with force something more detailed. It was simply, we as representing all the stakeholders in the valley believe it is worthwhile to look at state grant funds opportunities to preemptively look out and see which wells are going to go dry, and rather than having to treat them as an emergency type issue, we look at where they might be, and potentially they're in water district areas that may be eligible for consolidation. And if the study shows that it's cost effective to get those grants and to do it, that we take those monies that we've already contributed to the state tax base and use that money, but only where cost effective. So there's an assumption implied there that it's going to be, a board and water district decision ultimately as to this is cost effective. So it was not to say you must do this if it doesn't make sense at all.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, we'll move to the phones. Caller, go ahead.
Hello, this is Renee Westerlusk. My comment has to do with the part of the PAC report that covered, documentation, as David Janis put in the report. It is that part refers to requiring shallow well owners to come up with all kinds of maintenance and repair records when applying for the shallow well mitigation program assistance. And the form you have to fill out, you really have to be a well driller to fill it out correctly. And for a small shallow well owner having like a single residential home on a plot of land in this valley, to expect them to meet the same standards of regular annual maintenance and repairs that a municipal water district would perform on their wells is too onerous. And it seems to me that shallow well mitigation program assistance form needs to be modified for the shallow well owner that's on a much tighter budget to maintain a well than a municipal water district. So that needs to be addressed. I think that you need to make the maintenance records much less required. The state, I checked with DWR, they don't require shallow well owners to do all kinds of maintenance and repairs automatically on their wells on a regular basis. And so I don't see how, if they apply for assistance on the shallow well mitigation program, because they've had trouble with their well, it might be due to declining water table level, that you can enforce the same type of standards you would expect a municipal water district to abide by in maintaining their wells. That's my comment, but that's a big onerous thing, the maintenance records and repair records, and especially over decades. Some people are good at retaining a lot of records like that, others are not. And it turned out on the PAC, we've got 3 members that have shallow wells, and they're very meticulous about their records. But I know people who aren't meticulous about keeping those kinds of records. And I don't think it's fair to eliminate someone struggling with a well that may be impacted by lowering groundwater levels just because they can't produce all this documentation on their wells. That's my comment. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, seeing no further comments, thank you, Mr. Janis. All right, item number 12, date of the next meeting. Next meeting will be on June 14th, 2023. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.